Welcome to MCB Hope Network TV. I'm Pastor Andrew Columbia. Join us for a weekly program focusing on hope and healing for all who will listen. Why? We love God and we love people, and we care about our community. Hello and welcome to MCB Hope Network TV. I'm Pastor Andrew Columbia. It's another day to live, to love, and to serve, and I'm always excited and blessed to have special guests on with me that have a story. Listen, everybody has a story, and your story matters. And today I have a special guest, my friend Charlie Nicosia. Charlie, welcome. Good to have you today.
Thank you, Pastor Andrew.
And Charlie's going to share a little bit about his story, and he's going to just introduce who he is. So Charlie, I'm just going to turn it over to you, and why don't you just tell a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. Well, I grew up in the Bronx, Italian-American descent.
Okay.
And that was I wouldn't trade it for the world. I loved growing up in that culture. I had a beautiful, loving family. But as we do, we allow culture and movies and music and people to allow it to shape us and tell us who we're supposed to be.
Okay.
And I did that, Pastor. I bought it all hook, line, and sinker, as I say. And I became a young man very much into my physical presence. Bodybuilding, martial arts became a way of defining myself. And it was all about, growing up in that culture was all about reputation and
Sure.
Who's doing what, that type of thing.
You grew up in the John Travolta era.
Yes, I did. That whole Saturday
I can kind of.
So that was, how I grew up. And as one of the things I do now is a prison ministry.
Okay.
And I get to speak to men about that, like guarding yourself against that, because I became, as we go, we don't realize we take it too far. And then as I got a little older, and my group of friends, but as we would call it a crew,
Right.
were hanging out.
Sure.
We would get more involved in different things, and we gravitated towards the things that weren't good. And I, from a young age, I started getting in trouble with the law. I was very unlawful, and it was causing a lot of strife on my family, a lot of pain on my family. But it was almost like normal. It was almost like just kind of being accepted until it got to the point where it became serious.
Wow.
And
how serious?
Well, it was one night in Manhattan where I ended up really getting locked up, and I was facing jail time.
Wow.
And by the grace of God, I ended up getting probation.
Okay.
But you would have thought that taught me my lesson. It didn't. And I kept going. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up later on in life, I was always in like this pull between the corporate world and the street world.
Okay.
I felt like I had these two talents that they were always fighting one another, almost like as we would liken it to the flesh and the spirit man.
So you wanted success.
I wanted success. I just didn't know where my purpose was at the time. I was able to be successful in the business world, but I was also able to be successful in the street world. And I kept vacillating between the two, kind of a bounce back and forth. And then it came to a point in my 30s where I was married, had my son at home, I had a daughter. And we were managing a club in the city. It's known as, as the world would call it, a gentleman's club. Nothing gentleman about them. Mm-hmm. And there was a double homicide that took place. 15 minutes prior to, after I left, it took place. And it really changed my thinking. It really got me into a new thinking where I just didn't see the value, and I just saw so much pain in that life. And I made a promise to my wife, and at that time, to turn things around. And
could I ask you about that a little
sure,
bit? So
absolutely.
When you said double homicide, how it affected you? What did you see? What took place that actually rattled you? Did you see the bodies? I mean, what took place?
That I didn't actually see that. But I knew the young men very well.
Okay.
Very well. They both worked for me at that particular club.
Okay, that's explains.
One was a manager, one was a security, and they were wonderful young men. And they had nothing to do with what took place. It was really wrong place, wrong time, and It was very painful for me. That was my experience. I feel like my heart broke twice, because I'm thinking of the families, and I'm thinking about how these young men were robbed of any kind of future.
Sure.
When I say young, Pastor, I mean young. These guys were in their early 20s.
Wow.
And like I said, they had nothing to do with that life, and they didn't deserve what happened to them. And I just saw all that. I really started to see the pain in the lifestyle that we were all living at that time.
Right. So how did that lead you to a personal relationship with Jesus Christ?
You know, I've always had, and I've always been blessed with friends. God has always given me amazing people in my life. I felt like that's one of the ways that he always spoke to me, was he would bring me someone that would say, look, let's get out of this. I have a job for you. And that's what happened. I started working in a bank at the time, and it was pretty easy for me to reinvent myself. Different suits, different hairstyle, you know, getting out of the street, getting into corporate America. And my career started doing very, very well. Not immediately, but over time, it built up. And I really made a commitment, because at that time, my friends a lot of my friends got arrested. There was a whole big FBI thing that came down.
Wow.
So it was very dynamic.
So you broke ties from that world.
I did.
Okay.
I did. And it wasn't difficult, because most of them were away at that time.
Gotcha.
But I also made that commitment to my wife to tell her, look, this is not going to be our life any longer. And my career started doing really well. And I became an account executive. Then I became a manager. And I started making very, very good money.
Okay.
Christ was not my life, though. So I was building this empire, as I would like to say, on sand, because in 2008, the economy crashed.
Right.
And what I did for a living took the first hit. I was at the epicenter of what took place, because I was a wholesale mortgage banker.
Oh, yeah, I remember those days.
So you know those days.
I got that low-interest mortgage that was inflatable.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden it blew up and your rates doubled. I know all about that.
I watched the whole industry change, and not, you know, and it's like I hear that, but when I started, we made sense, and then we got to the point again, things taken too far.
Sure.
Where it was a good thing turned into a bad thing.
Right.
And even at my tail end of my career, I didn't even like what I did anymore, because I saw the usury involved, and I went from making great money to making outstanding money, but I wasn't comfortable. And it all came to a screeching halt, because it blew up. There was no more secondary markets.
Right.
So here I stand. I'm at the point now where I felt very successful. I had a nice home. I had the car I wanted, vacations I wanted to go on, the clothing I wanted, the jewelry I wanted. It was all.
You were very comfortable.
I was very comfortable. And you couldn't have spoke to me about anything at that time. I actually look back and I say, you know what, I had a certain arrogance about me. And, you know, money has that effect on people sometimes, and it did on me.
You were a self-made man.
Yes. Yes, I will not argue that point.
You were a self-made man.
I was absolutely self-made. And, but when it came to a halt, I had nowhere to go. And I kind of went in, I looked for work. I tried to reinvent myself. Nothing was happening. And then I got approached by someone that asked me if I would work for him. And by that point, I said yes. I said, I just need to bring home a check. I need to keep the lights on in the house. And my home was going into foreclosure at that time. So everything I amassed and created over that time was all disappearing right before my eyes. And it was very humbling, which I needed. And little did I know, I was working, and I got back into construction at that point.
Okay.
So I went from, you know, being in corporate to now I'm in construction. I had time on my hands. I started going to the gym again. So I started rebuilding myself up physically a bit. And I was an angry man because everything that I identified myself with was gone. And here I am now. I have a house that's in foreclosure. My wife has been an amazing partner. She went out, she got her real estate license, which now she's doing for 12 years and doing very well at. But at that time, we were just rebuilding, and we had to reinvent ourselves. And I was angry. I was a very angry person. And I was kind of at that point, I think a lot of my family and friends, people that knew me best, they're worried, because they started seeing that my old nature rise up, because almost like I wanted to make an example out of someone, that I was angry and someone had to pay.
You know, usually anger and pride go hand in hand.
Oh, absolutely. Boy, if they're not first cousins, they're brother and sister.
Believe it.
Right? So I went to work one day, and I walked into work, and there was this man sitting there, and he got up and introduced himself to me. So I immediately went into the back to the guy that owned the company, and I said, who's that? Why is he here? And he said, well, he just came out of prison.
Wow.
And little did I know, that was God sending help. And I had no idea it was coming. And he introduced himself, and we went to Queens the very next day. And we had to look at a roof together, and I was talking to him, and I felt very comfortable with him right away. He had something, I didn't know what it was, but I liked it. I liked it. And
his presence carried weight to it.
Yeah, and I couldn't figure out why he was so happy. He just came home from serving, I think it was 4 years.
Wow.
And I was like, he's in a much better mood than I am. And I'm, you know, trying to get a handle on that, which wasn't making a lot of sense at that time. But it got revealed. So he was asking me questions. I'm kind of tight-lipped. I didn't want to share too much about myself.
Right.
But he was very honest, and he told me the way he was raised and what he went through and the things that happened to him, being incarcerated 2 times, and now he's studying to be a pastor. Okay. And I said, wait, hold on a second. Where did that come from? You know, how?
Yeah, right.
You have to tell me how that works, because
Sure.
being born and raised in the Bronx, you know, Catholic, I don't know anything about this.
Right.
So over lunch, he explained it to me, and it sounded nice. And then he said, when the food came out, this was kind of like the defining moment, and people can't grasp this, but it all happened over a prayer.
Interesting.
Because when the food hit the table, he said, brother, do you mind if I pray over the meal? And I said, no, go ahead. And for the first time, I heard a prayer from the heart, not a scripted prayer. And it was just wonderful. He thanked God for the day. He thanked God for the food, my company, the fact that we're going home to beautiful wives, 3 beautiful, healthy children, and that we had jobs. And I started thinking, I was like, so you thank God for all of that? And he says, absolutely. He says, a month ago, I didn't have any of that.
Wow.
And what I didn't realize, he was planting seeds. And
Sure.
But I felt a change. I felt something starting to stir. I was always a seeker. I always wanted information. I had a library of self-help books. And I read them. Problem was, they never lasted.
Right.
They kind of worked for a little while, and then I would somehow either forget it, discard them. And I've always wanted truth. I would always be very sensitive to hypocrisy.
Okay.
And what I saw in this man was a truth, a real truth in the way he believed and what he was living. Even in the way we spoke about who we were working for. He says, we don't work for him. He says, we work for him. Wow. Ooh, these are all new concepts to me. Wow. But boy, was it stirring. And then he said to me one day, what are you doing on Saturday? And I said, I'm not doing anything. And he said, do you mind if I pick you up? I'd like to take you to a meeting. And that was the men's discipleship at Yorktown Assembly of God.
Okay. Awesome.
And that's when God really revealed himself, that what I was doing in my life, Pastor, the best way for me to describe it is there's a hole that only Jesus can fill.
I believe that.
And I used everything. I tried what culture offered. You know, the world says, here you go, right? Get money. You know, there's women.
Right.
There's alcohol. There's all of that lifestyle. And like Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, it comes up empty. And it came up empty for me. So I said, you know, I'm witnessing these men, and I see what they've been through, and I heard some stories, and it was incredible. And something told me, keep coming. Don't stop. Don't come.
You were drawn to it.
I was drawn. And even on days when I didn't want to wake up and I didn't want to go, something moved me out of that bed. And my wife was looking at me every day going, who is this man? Because the only time I got up that early was to play golf.
Right.
That was it.
Right.
Not to go to the gym, not to do anything else. And here I am.
Getting up early to go to a men's meeting.
Grabbing a Bible. And that was really, she's looking at me trying to figure that one out. But she liked what she saw. And she watched for 7 months. And then what took place was we had a movie night at the church.
Okay.
And you know, when we say as Christians, and we speak Christianese, but the Holy Spirit said to me, invite her and the kids to the church. Let them see what is there.
Right.
And it was my birthday, and I asked her, she said, what do I want? And I said, I would love for you guys to come.
Okay.
And they did. And my wife's a very astute woman, very smart, and she was witnessing and watching. And what she saw were men in servitude. And they were moving around. They were getting chairs for the women, and they made sure everyone was accommodated for. And she met the pastor and his wife, and then she joined me at church. And that was a change of life for me. That turned everything around.
And she just liked what she saw. She received it.
Absolutely. And what I tell men, and you know my story, is I became a men's discipler.
Right.
And what I tell the men is, you will know them by their fruit. Very
true.
And if you're walking the walk, he's going to work on that marriage. And we had a great marriage, but now it's a phenomenal one.
Right.
But he really changed. I think what really was the key for my wife and I was she saw the difference in me and how I treated and how I dealt with issues with the children in particular.
Wow.
I don't think anything challenges us